Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. Today we turn to talking about yet another Hollywood actor who's going after men, in one of the cringiest ways possible too. Last time, just a few days ago actually, we were talking about an actor named David Schwimmer, most famous for appearing on the hit show Friends. In that video about Dave, we talked about how he was self-flagellating in an interview with The Guardian, where he was saying that he was very much aware of his so-called privilege, him being a man of a certain color and all. I of course combated this statement quickly and accurately when I pointed out that David wasn't getting privilege because of his color at all. It was because of his parents being well off and them saving money and preparing to have a kid properly. That's the only real privilege Dave received in his life, and there's nothing wrong or offensive about that at all either. And now today we've got another actor who bears a number of striking similarities between David Schwimmer too, and he's saying some of the same kind of BS. This time we're talking about Jonah Hill, who is bashing men too, in another interview where this actor is trying to get attention as well by pandering to leftists, of course. And besides Jonah and David both being actors who are mostly known for their comedic work as well, but also they have another funny but noteworthy similarity, which I can no longer ignore because this trait is all too common with anti-white male racists out there. But at the same time, I don't know if I can state what it is outright here without getting in trouble. So let me just put it this way. David and Jonah don't celebrate Christmas in December. They might even have the same rabbi for all we know, if you know what I'm saying. And there's nothing wrong with celebrating different holidays like this, of course, but it does seem rather odd when guys like this go out and openly attack white men instead of addressing their own specific group, which they never do, unless it's done in a positive way, of course. In the last video, David said he got privileged for being a white male, and now Jonah is saying we should kick that entire group out of all of Hollywood and more. That's right, white males are clearly the only group you can actively attack, hate on, and be racist towards and bigoted against, at least according to left-wingers. For more details on this Jonah Hill story, let's first check out this tweet from Breitbart that says, Jonah Hill says real change in Hollywood will happen when white men relinquish their power. Yikes. And no other race actively roots against itself quite like white people. And what a bad idea for us to do. Also, I'm not sure if any of these social justice warrior types realize this, but once we are removed from society and taken out of our country and our homes, bad things are going to happen there. Decay, loss of income, and even chaos and destruction are definite possibilities of what is going to follow from this. And also, this racial purity bullshit, picking on one group in order to prop up another, well, it all sounds rather familiar to me, like something that happened in World War II. Pretty ironic too, because these are the same kinds of SJWs who are the ones that call their opponents 1940s Germans all the time, when in reality, they're the ones who are acting like them. Projection at its finest, or worst, depending on how you're looking at it. But anyway, let's read on into the article attached to this tweet next then, and see where else this story goes. Hill, who recently directed an Adidas shoe commercial, is celebrated on the Adidas website as a game changer in the film industry. Speaking of that change, Hill told Adidas he thinks that Hollywood is changing. He claimed people who weren't empowered to tell stories are getting the opportunity to tell a story. But the 21 Jump Street star does not feel that the change is happening fast enough. And Jonah Hill has a solution to the problem: rid the industry of white men. Real change, Hill told Adidas, is going to happen when everyone running the studios and running all these streaming companies are women, and people who haven't had the voice that white men have gotten throughout that time. Well, first of all, women and minorities and people from other countries and backgrounds, they've all had voices before, for a very long time, perhaps since forever, since the dawn of time and the beginning of humanity. Blacks and browns and whites and Asians, we've all had different places and time periods throughout history where our tribes and countries and nations have had voices and prominence, and they've given these groups plenty of voices over the years. So I'm not sure what he's talking about here. Now, flash forward more to the present, and it appears we're talking more about Hollywood and film stuff here, so let's focus on that next. Sure, Hollywood, or the American movie, TV, and entertainment industry, it's been predominantly white since its inception too, but that's because this country has been majority that race since its beginning as well. And in other places like, say, China, they have their own film industry in Hong Kong, which is also mostly made up of Chinese people and others from that area. Brown people have their own film industries in places too, like how they make movies in in Spanish out of places like Mexico or some South American countries. Brazil has a film industry, as does every other country in the world. In Europe, the French have movies starring the French, and British have their own, and Germans too, and so on. So it's really only the Americans who get attacked and called racist for having films with our own people in them. And that's because SJWs are these social Marxist assholes. And their real goal isn't diversity at all. They actually want to get rid of all the white people, which is exactly what Jonah even says here almost specifically, lifting the thin veil off of himself, so to speak, and exposing the real motives behind their very corrupt and dangerous curtain. I mean, just imagine if we said anything like this about any other group of people. Would me saying that I want all of the Armenian people out of the hookah industry, would that fly at all? Or what about telling women they can't be fashion models anymore because they've done it too much for too long and they've dominated that industry for years? So time to move on, ladies. Or back to talking about film, we all know we couldn't say something like Asians should no longer work in Hollywood movies. And actually, to make this analogy even more accurate, you would have to go to Asia and say that, and say, for example, there's too many Japanese people in their Japanese movies based out of Tokyo. So that means we need to take all the Japanese out of Tokyo cinema and fill their industry with non-Japanese now. A pretty ridiculous statement and suggestion, which is just as ridiculous as what Jonah Hill is saying now with his new Adidas woke ad campaign. And to put it frankly, Jonah is being a suck-up wimp here, who's trying to kiss ass to women and minorities to get in with the woke crowd and SJWs. And that's not even mentioning the fact that Jonah Hill is being a hypocrite here as well. He tells Adidas white men should step aside, but he sure isn't yielding his gig and passing off his directing job here at Adidas, which he could easily have done if he was being honest. Really, Jonah Hill should be giving up his own roles to a minority woman, shouldn't he? I mean, that's how this logic would work if it was being straightforward and direct. These SJWs could solve all these so-called issues of discrimination if they would just give up their own positions of power to women and minorities. So it really makes you wonder here then, why aren't they doing that? Well, it seems to me these guys do not believe in what they're saying at all. They're just saying it to get attention in magazines and articles on the internet. And also, quite possibly, this anti-white male rhetoric is being implemented to serve other ulterior motives, such as attacking a race they don't like in underhanded ways. And also, these anti-white male actors are typically just trying to tear down white people so they can get more roles and jobs for themselves. It's a sneaky way to take down their competition. The first commercial Hill directed for the company insists that superstar stands for all who aren't afraid to stand up for something, for those who know change can't happen alone and believe it takes a team to make a difference in the world, the company added. Well, in my opinion, and to many others too, so-called superstars aren't created this way. It seems like the left's approach to this is to try and attack and tear down their assumed opposition, when really they should just be working harder to do their own thing properly. But this teardown method is how Democrats have been acting all over the world for years now, in other realms as well, like in Congress and the Senate, where right now Democrats are wasting their time trying to impeach Trump over nothing, instead of actually accomplishing something themselves, writing memos and proposing resolutions and passing laws and getting their country better. No, Democratic politicians like Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, and Maxine Waters, they don't accomplish anything on their own, despite the fact that they've been in politics for decades and decades. But at the end of the day, these politicians and their districts are doing worse, and these Democrats have accomplished nothing aside from wasting their time trying to attack Trump because he's a president they don't like, who hasn't really done anything wrong, they just don't like him, which is probably because, of course, he's a straight white male. And also, liberals are using the same kinds of tactics in media and entertainment industries too, like with video games, for example, whose developers are being told men are toxic now, that way they'll hire more girls. This has happened in the comic book industry as well, where women and minorities are getting propped up and added to gigs, affirmative action style, and they're being put into spots where they don't have experience and they're not the best fit for the job either. TV and film are suffering from this too, and they're going with the Jonah Hill, David Schwimmer type approach, meaning they're attacking straight white males in order to squeeze us out and make way for women and minorities, even if those women and minorities aren't as talented or skilled or well suited for these jobs. Now, with all that said, the point here is clear. Leftists refuse to earn their way in the world, and they have no interest in working or accomplishing or making a name for themselves through their own good work and making stuff happen. No, they just want the easy way out, so that's why they just attack their opponents, even though sometimes we all should be working together, and other times we're literally colleagues at an office gig or working on a TV show, but instead of trying to work better and do well yourself, which is what everyone else does, liberals just try and attack the people competing with them. It's also worth noting that minorities and women and other groups the SJWs prefer, well, they've already become highly successful in Hollywood and in entertainment in many ways. Oprah and Jay-Z are both black billionaires who openly support crime and criminals too, but that's a whole other story. The point is, they're rich and successful, and if America was really as racist as they say, this wouldn't have happened. Tyler Perry is another great example of a highly successful African American in entertainment who's made numerous movies and shows with great success in his niche. And not only is Tyler Perry worth $600 million, but his films, including the wildly popular Medea series, well, they've made millions upon millions themselves, employing and supporting and entertaining black people and their audiences and performers, which shows how heavily accepted they actually are in America and how we're not racist in the process. Dave Chappelle is another good example. This time he's a wildly successful stand-up comedian too, who also had a hit TV show and a special on Netflix and everything. Asian directors get a chance in America too, like with Ang Lee, who does lots of great work, as do Mexican directors like Alfonso Cuarón, Alejandro González Inarritu, and Guillermo del Toro. I probably butchered half those names, but I think you guys get the point. Women and minorities already have gotten great chances and representation in Hollywood and entertainment. So with that said, if you're Jonah Hill or other SJWs and you see what you think is too many white men in a certain field, like what they imply, well, first of all, that's just more on you. You're an anti-white racist if you see a group of us together and think that's some kind of problem. Just like how if someone saw a group of another race and said, hey, there's a problem here, that would be offensive too. And also, I would suggest instead of assuming there's more whites being successful in film because of racism, which is based on no facts or evidence, I would think more about why you might be seeing greater numbers of this certain kind of people who happen to be in a group you don't like. For the first and most obvious example, of course, there's more white people in American entertainment because there's more of us in this country. It's a numbers game, so since we have about 70% of the people here, we're likely to have 70% of the famous people as well. Now, the second reason this might be happening gets a little more tricky, and I might even be called racist for saying it like this, but sometimes, in fact, more often than you think, sometimes certain people in groups and kinds of personalities, they're drawn to certain professions, which tends to make them better at said job. Now, this happens all the time, but it's only called offensive or racist when straight white males are the majority, or the ones drawn to something like filmmaking, acting, or directing. But in other examples, it's totally okay. Like when, say, women dominate fields like nursing, teaching, makeup-related work, or adult film. Well, that's a-okay and fine and dandy, and it's encouraged by the SJWs even, like how they commend Asians for being good doctors or more likely to run nail salons or massage parlors. And black people dominate a lot of sports like basketball and football, but could you imagine a leftist saying there's too many African Americans in the NFL? Let alone would they suggest that blacks stand down so other races could have a chance there? Or what about how gay guys always happen to be wedding planners? Could you ever imagine an SJW complaining about that? But for some reason, when there's more white movie directors or some other thing related to film, well, every liberal and their mother comes out of the woodwork to say that's wrong, offensive, and racist, when it's really not. And it really goes to show what this is all about, doesn't it? Finally, let's look at the actual Adidas ad and webpage that was put up for this campaign, which is where this whole Jonah Hill story originated. As they said earlier, Hill was hired to direct this new woke ad for Adidas, which is what prompted him to go on this ridiculous anti-white male tirade, getting all woke and shit. And here you can see Jonah has his very own page on the Adidas website. Adidas, of course, being known for selling soccer shoes and other athletic garb. And I gotta say though, Jonah is looking a little awkward. I don't know what it is, like he's overdressed or something, almost like he's trying to look like an Italian mobster from The Sopranos here. Those gangsters would wear tracksuits like this too, kind of like how black dudes can pull it off as well, but Jonah Hill, not so much. He just looks like a weak beta soy boy who's trying to act tough, and he wants to be woke and cool so people accept him, but it's just coming off as forced and awkward and cringy, and quite frankly, his message about taking jobs away from white males based on their skin color and gender, that's exactly the definition of sexism and racism, and that's messed up. But instead of getting called out here, Jonah Hill is getting commended for this, which goes to show that getting woke can get you that initial spark of attention, especially from these biased press releases and media outlets. But at the same time, this attention won't last, and it can turn for the worst. In the long run, you'll look like a biased, self-hating, horribly bigoted person, which is pretty hard to come back from, in my opinion. This is especially upsetting for me with Jonah Hill because I really am a big fan of his acting work. His movies are some of the funniest out there today, which sucks because now, knowing more about the man himself and how he acts like this, well, it really leaves a bad taste in your mouth. What do you guys think? Is Jonah Hill and Adidas getting woke? In what world is removing an an entire race of gender of people from an industry not racist or offensive or wrong. I feel like I'm living in bizarro world over here, when really this is just standard fare for current year at this point. Comment your thoughts on everything below, and thanks for watching No Bullshit. Hit that like button to help support this channel, and we'll see y'all next time.